Hello and welcome to the Under Center podcast. I am your host for today, Fionn Malloy, joined as always by Dara and Jake. And as is typical with this show, if I'm the one hosting, that usually means only one thing, and that means we're talking about the Washington Commanders. And we are privileged and delighted to be joined by head coach of the Washington Commanders, Ron Rivera. Ron, thanks a million for your time and welcome to the show.
No, thanks, Fionn. It's good to be on with you and Dara and Jake. It's kind of neat. It's a heck of an experience. Thank you.
Yes, and it's quite timely as well because you were just telling us off air you have a trip planned to come over to the Emerald Isle. So you're obviously looking for the cheeky in terms of travel planning and beauty spots to hit up while you're over here.
Oh yeah, most certainly. In fact, my wife pretty much has all the information, but we're going to play Old Head, Waterville, Hogshead, Tralee, Ballybunion, Port Marnock, European Club, and then we'll depart. And we really do look forward to it. I was with the Chicago Bears back in 1997 when we played a preseason game there against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was really a really neat experience. It really was.
Well, we have some beautiful courses over here, absolutely.
Yeah, and I hope you're good at playing in the wind, because a lot of these American courses we see on the PGA Tour not very windy. A lot of air courses are links courses, so I hope your wind game, your iron game, is pretty strong.
Well, I know this much. It's there.
And also, Ron, I'll give you a little tip. Even though it's July, you'll be here. It could still rain anytime you're in Ireland out and about. So I would always pack something for the rain.
Oh, believe me, we will pack. We've heard, we've been warned. We watched it on TV, so we most certainly do look forward to it.
It might go from 25 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees and really, really rainy in an instant.
Oh boy! Well, I look forward to it. I really do, Jake. To me, it's about the experience of getting an opportunity to play golf in one of the more beautiful countries in this world. And I really do mean that, because the one thing I do remember about being in Ireland back in 1997 was everything was so green and lush. It was beautiful. It really was.
Certainly, and it still is. And we would recommend as well, while you're in Dublin, check out Croke Park as well. It's been really modernized since the last time you were there. Really? If you get a chance to go, it's obviously our national sports. Gaelic football and hurling are hosted there. It's the primary stadium. So if you get a chance, there's a brilliant museum there. I know you're probably a big sports guy, so you get a kind of a sense of the Irish sports we have. But it's really cool.
Well, I do know this. When we were there, when we played, we got a chance to watch a rugby match. Yeah. And the one thing I will say is the Irish fans get into it. They sit down, they lean up against that bar that's there, and they drink their beer and they sing and enjoy the game. It was a lot of fun. It really was.
Absolutely. It's a pity. I don't know if there'll be any games around while you're over. I know you were, as you're saying, you're pretty busy playing golf, but if you get a chance to go and see any of the native games, the hurling or the football, highly recommend while you're over. And of course, we were talking off air, as we say over here, you're a little bit of a scooper. I think you enjoy a pint here or there, and the Guinness Storehouse, of course. It's a bit cliche, but they do a fantastic visitor experience. So I think we definitely recommend you go and see that while you're over as well.
It's probably one of the nicest places in Dublin to have a pint, because you overlook the entire city. It's actually really nice at the top.
And it's called the Guinness Experience?
Guinness Storehouse, yeah.
The Guinness Storehouse. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Well, Google everything in Dublin, anything in Ireland. If you Google it, it'll point you towards a Guinness at some stage. So if you Google it, you should come up with the right links to get booked in there. But it's fantastic. Cool. Anyway,
you don't have to worry either, Ron. You have 3 tour guides here now for your next couple of weeks. So anything, all it is a text or an email away, and we can probably give you all the best spots to get to see while you're over here for sure.
Well, cool. I look forward to it, fellas.
But anyway, we aren't a travel podcast. We are an American football podcast. And I wanted to start, Ron, with something very interesting that not many other head coaches have had ever in their experience. And that was the renaming that Washington went through over the course of the last couple of years. Very interesting. Not an experience a lot of people have. Obviously, every head coach comes in. They want to put their stamp in terms of the culture of the team on their team. How did you find this kind of unique experience of having a very literal culture change in terms of the name and the logos and the standards that was in Washington?
I think the really neat thing about being able to do that is exactly what you said. We had a chance to change who we are. and step away from some of the negativity that we've been dealing with. So when we became the Washington football team, that was our first step, and it was kind of unique to us. I think the guys really enjoyed it. It was a little bit different. One thing for us that was unique was it was an opportunity to kind of rebrand ourselves. And then as we prepared for the next one, the Commanders, that was even a bigger celebration because it was going to become our permanent name. And so this organization, our business side, Jason Wright and the folks, they went and did a really deep dive, a big time dive. We had probably about 100,000 submissions from people that were telling us, hey, become this team or rename it to this team. So they took a look at a lot of those, and they seriously considered a lot of them. And they came up with a list, I guess somewhere around 10,000, 15,000 of them that they vetted and looked at. And then they got that list down to a few thousand. They got that list down to a couple hundred. And then they got that list down to about 50. And then they really started to peel away. And then they gave the players and myself, some of the other coaches, some of the alumni an opportunity to have a big voice in this. And it was really kind of a unique experience. And I think it went well. I think we've grasped onto the name, the Commanders, and the community has reacted very nicely, which is also a big deal for us.
And Coach, did you have much of an involvement in the name process yourself? Or are you more focused on the player side of things?
I didn't get into it until they limited it. And it was a really cool thing when they limited it, because what happened more so than anything else, I got the reasoning why these names were on the list. That was probably the most important thing.
That's really good. I was a fan of the Red Wolves name because of I think there was an Air Force kind of troop about that, and I thought that was a good name. But the Commanders I can get behind too.
Yes. Well, the thing about every name was, we had to vet them on the financial side as well to find out where it stood in terms of who owned the rights to it. Mm-hmm. And so some of the teams would have become a big legal battle for us and would have probably cost the team more money than it really needed to be. So that's why some teams got eliminated, because you've got to take this dive, find out who owns the rights to it. And then if you want to get it away from them, you're going to have to pay, full price, or you got to come in some sort of financial agreement. So that was some of the things that we had to really take a look at.
But Ron, I forgot to give you a little bit of background of the guys here. So you might spot over the back of Dara's shoulder there. He's a Seattle Seahawks fan. He's got a couple of Seattle jerseys in there behind him. Jake, unfortunately, is a New York Giants fan. So feel free to ignore any of his questions for the rest of the interview.
No, I was a little concerned because I thought maybe Dara was a little sloppy with the litter in the background. I could swallow that. I saw Jake's thing, and I was a little concerned. I thought maybe Jake had dropped something there and needed to bring it up a bit. No, I see it. Now I see the Manning. Relax.
And then I actually am a Washington Commanders fan, so I apologize. I may say we during the course of the interview. Of course, everyone knows we're over here. We like to be really involved as fans, so I may slip up and say we.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, Fionn. You're going to be the one that gets the best gifts from me.
Yes.
I
haven't managed to nab any of the Commanders branded logo stuff, so that's why I don't have any repping at the moment. So
it's
I'll
coming.
sort that out.
What size? What size do I need to know?
Medium.
Okay. You'll be easy. I won't worry about the other two.
Yeah, make sure they don't need anything. They're okay.
I'll take anything I can put on the wall behind me. It's fine.
I'm glad every man has a price.
Mine is very low, it seems.
We're only the bigger lads because we actually all play on the same team together.
Oh, really?
Called the North Dublin Pirates. Fionn is our defensive guru / star safety. Jake is our running back, and I would be defensive tackle. I was going to say star, but I'm not that sort of, I'm not that way. I'll let the other lads say that. But that's the origin actually of this show. Is we all talked football at training. We said, hey, let's put a mic in front of it and see if anyone will listen.
Well, that's cool. No, that really is. I tell you. So what's the hardest thing that you guys have found that as far as that's concerned, as far as playing the game?
Well, for us, it's kind of a lot of the teams over here struggle to get some players. So a lot of time we end up with 15 dudes on the field or at training and stuff. So you end up playing both sides of the ball quite a bit. So you might get a lot tired. A lot of players get gassed kind of early because you have to play offense, then defense, and special teams all together in one.
I think obviously as well, we have to pay for the privilege of playing American football, which we love to do, but it does also mean we all have jobs. So getting kind of training down and getting training sessions in is really tricky. So I think that's one of the big problems, but we all love it, and there's a really strong following over here. And I think it's growing. It's one of Ireland's fastest growing sports. It's still small, but it gets bigger every single year.
Well, that's good to hear. It is. We're
going to dive in now, and Ron, thank you very much for your time, because in doing our research for this, we realized obviously the OTAs are over and we're about to, I believe your mini camp started today. Am I right? So
yeah, in fact, we just finished our first session. It went very well. Thought our guys had a good practice today, and looking forward to things picking up where we left off tomorrow.
Excellent. And one question I wanted to ask you, obviously the rosters are a lot bigger now than they are at the end of the season. You would have obviously gone through the draft process, and a lot of undrafted free agents and stuff will be signed to teams. When does the assessment process start for you? Do you give them their OTAs to get their feet underneath them, get used to the pro game, and then get into kind of assessments in minicamp, or does assessment really start from day one?
Well, the mini camp is very big for you. I mean, it does start day one, but mini camp is really big because that to us as coaches is the culmination of the 10 practices or 9 practices that you have prior to mini camp. You put all your installations in, you go through all your drills, your practices. Now what you want to do, you want to stress them during these 3 practices and really see where they are. What have they learned? What do they do? How have they grown? Are they still making the same mistakes? Have they improved from those mistakes? Those are all the questions that we have to get answered to find out if we're ready to move to the next level. So this is a very important 3-day camp for us, because it is going to tell us a lot as to who's coming to camp, because some of these guys, you may trade out for somebody else just saying he wasn't ready and we don't think he's going to be ready. So you have to really go through this and look at these things.
And Coach, at this point of the season, you have a 90-man roster and you got to cut down then to whatever, the 51 man or whatever. Obviously, unfortunate part of this kind of sport is it can be a lot of injuries, especially when you have such a large gathering. You're all doing training probably for the first time after the off season. What do you as a coach do to kind of maybe not prevent it, but encourage your players to do a bit more conditioning or stretching, or how do you kind of influence that?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Jake, is right now, this is all about the developmental and growth of a player physically and athletically, in terms of, he's doing the lifting program, he's doing the conditioning program. What you always are concerned about is going to be that break. There's a 4.5-week break before we start training camp, and you don't want them to lose what they worked on. So you ask them, hey guys, we're going to send you home, and when we do send you home, we're going to give you the workout program. If there's a way you can stick to this, to keep yourself prepared and ready to go. And that's always one of the biggest concerns we have as coaches. So, we try to make sure, Jake, that these guys don't take too long of a break before they get back to work, so that when we show up, we can hit the ground running with guys ready to practice and ready to give us a good effort.
And with that 4-week break, Coach, do you yourself like to keep in contact with as many players as possible? Like, for example, when we went through the sort of, OTAs and stuff during the pandemic where it was all virtually based, would you still sort of have these Zoom sessions with the players and stuff to keep in touch with them?
We did. There's certain times of the year that we are allowed to contact with them and talk football. And that's really during the OTA program. It's when you start that off-season workout scheduling, that starts in April, middle of April, all the way up to now, when we were in the pandemic, all we could do was Zoom with them and talk with them. Now, we can talk to them anytime, but we can't get specifically involved with football. So there's that window of about 2.5 months that we are allowed to interact with our players and really dig deep a little bit about football and go through those discussions. But once you get to that point, you can't. So now when we go on that 4.5, 5-week break, they'll get an occasional, text message from us, just say, hey, just checking in, hope everything's going well. But we can't get in specifics, say, hey, hope everything's going well, hope you're working on this and you've been practicing that. We can't do that to the guys. So, it's really kind of just a follow-up checkup to see that, they're doing well.
And then just real quick. And if a player then asks you a question about football, are you allowed to answer that question, or do you kind of have to say?
Yeah. No, we can, Jake, but we, the intent should never be that, hey, we're doing this on purpose. But if a guy does ask you a question, it's pretty benign. You can answer it. You just can't get into too much detail.
Obviously, the league has been affected by COVID, as Dara mentioned, the last couple of seasons. Is there any innovations that you've kept now that everything's free and open again, that kind of a new way of doing things that you've kind of adapted from those COVID protocols?
Not necessarily. We one thing we have learned is we've got to keep more separation, more spread in the rooms, in the meeting rooms, throughout the facility. And to be honest with you, I've captured a lot of space. I've taken it from the business side and kind of said, we need it. So we kind of pass that over to the team. So that's been kind of good because I think one thing here is this facility here is set really for football only and not business as much. So, we're really looking to try to take over and dominate the space so we can make this a full football facility.
Obviously, during the course of OTAs, obviously coming up mini camps now, big storylines around the league that I think because they're so starved of news stories get a little bit blown up at this time of year is obviously players re-signing, who's holding out, who's not going to be out. We don't necessarily need to go into the details. We know you guys are working behind the scenes in terms of there's a lot of key players that need to be renegotiated and re-signed. But how do you feel at the moment the team stands in kind of your general plan when you took over this Washington team? Are you trending in the right direction? Are you close to kind of fulfilling that plan? Where do you see the progress so far?
Okay, first I want to make sure Jake and Dara aren't sharing this information.
I've got my own problems, coach, with my own team at the moment. I'm all right.
I feel really good about where we are. I really do, because the biggest thing is if you look at the transition and the turnover we've had, we've been able to keep a lot of the guys that we believe are core players. And I'm looking at our board right now, and just as you go through it, you sit there and say, man, we've done a good job over here. We've done a good job over here. We need a little bit more work up here. But one thing we really feel is that, once we can get Terry McLaurin taken care of, getting his contract redone, we really do believe that we've got a good group of young wide receivers. And we are a young football team. We really are. I mean, our average age is somewhere around 26, 25, somewhere in there. So that's really good for us. And what's happening is the previous 2 seasons, those guys have played a lot of football. And that's something that's been really, really good. And as we go through this, we look at, where else do we need to fill in? And to Jake's question about, we got 90. Actually, we have 91 on our full roster because we have an international player and he doesn't count against your overall numbers. And then when we cut down to 53, we will have by then gotten all the information we need on the guys. There'll be a couple of really tough decisions because we may be overloaded at one position or the other. But we've also got to be mindful of what the rest of the team needs. And then we keep 16 guys on our practice squad. So we'll finish with 69 total guys by the time we get done with camp.
And Coach, I want to mention look at, because you mentioned in various interviews just after the Super Bowl that you wanted to add depth to the QB room. And you've certainly done that in this offseason via the draft, of course, with Sam Howell, and through a trade, of course, acquiring Carson Wentz. With Wentz, first of all, of course, he was a QB that the team looked at before. Was this something that you did target heading into this offseason, or was this a sort of opportunity that you couldn't pass up when you heard that the Colts made him available?
No, Darren, it's a very good question, because when the season ended, the one thing we felt we really needed to do was we needed to solidify the quarterback position. And we felt if we could find a veteran guy that's had some experience but has had some success, we'd be in a really good position. And I think we could take the next step. So what I did, I actually went and I visited Coach Gibbs. Joe Gibbs and I sat down. We talked about these things. He kind of gave me a little bit of an outline, a little bit of an idea of how to go about that process. And so I used a lot of it, the information he gave me. We went and we did a lot of research on a lot of the quarterbacks that were out there. And the big thing we found was we just got to find guys that were available that would suit us and fit us. Well, when we took the deep dive with Carson, you looked at the experience he had, you look at the success he had throughout his career. And you can't deny that in 2016, the dude had a great year. He just had a phenomenal year, and then the year they won the Super Bowl, the 2017 season, they were 11-2 before he got hurt, and he was on track to be the league MVP. So then you go back and you look at what he did last year. on up until he got COVID in week 16 and 17. He had COVID, and you sit there and go, wow, he was really playing great. And then the last 2 weeks, he had a little bit of struggle. They had a little bit of struggle. But if you got past those two and looked at the whole thing, you said, wow, this guy really – and then you look at his numbers, and he's in top 10 in almost every category. So he was somebody that we looked at, we mapped out. And like you said, once we found out the availability, we went after it and tried to secure him as our quarterback.
You mentioned those numbers. Were you surprised that he was even available? Obviously, you mentioned it was a little bit difficult, but winning record 9-8, 27 and 7 touchdowns, interceptions, top 10 for touchdowns thrown. Yep. Seems really weird that he was even on the block.
Well, I think there was a little bit of philosophical difference amongst them in the building, and sometimes when those things happen, it really depends on who's on what side as to who's going to win out. And so it worked for us. That's what I'm happy about. And then being able to have Sam Howell and draft him in the 5th round, coupled with Taylor, we really feel we've solidified the quarterback position for ourselves.
Coach, you're well known for being really involved in the NFL in terms of inclusivity and diversity. The last couple of weeks, you were in with an NFL committee trying to work on the kind of diversity rules that they have to try and increase diversity and persuade teams to be more involved. Obviously, you've also been really involved in getting women into the NFL, and we're starting to see that trickle through of women being involved in full-time coaching roles. How important is that to you, and how much do you believe that the NFL can really grow by including these new rules?
I think the biggest thing about inclusion is if you include everybody, you've now increased the pool, the size of your candidates, and you can pick the best one. And it doesn't matter whether they're a man or a woman. I did this one year with my coaches just to make a point. We were looking to hire somebody, and I was looking at the resumes of the top 3 candidates. And I kept noticing that there was one guy that had this unbelievable resume. But he was the one that everybody, not just everybody, but a number of the guys just, they weren't sure about. But I looked at the other 2 guys, and they lacked the experience. So what I did was I took the names off the resume. I changed the teams that they had worked for. Okay, I did. And then I put the resumes out, and I said, guys, has anybody looked at the resume? They said, no, we haven't seen the resumes. And I said, okay, great. I said, these are the 3 resumes. I want you guys to take a look at these 3 resumes and tell me what you think. And the first thing they'll say is, wow, this one has a lot of experience. I said, exactly. I said, and now look at what he's done. And they go, oh my gosh, God, he was the coordinator here. He was a coordinator over here. This was his record. Wow, they had these rankings. And then look at the other guys. Well, he's only been a coordinator. No, he's only been a coordinator once over here. So, and they said, well, and I said, so if you were going to make a decision, how would you do it? So, well, I'd go over here. And I said, okay, that's very interesting. Very, very interesting, because it was the one that was getting the least amount of attention. And at the end of the day, that's the guy who we ended up hiring only because, it was a blind draw. They didn't, they didn't look at anything and say, okay, I don't like who this guy is. You know what I'm saying? But they couldn't, because everything pointed to, and this guy's been a great coach in the league. So I'm fine with that. But to me, if we did that to all the candidates that come in, you would find out that you would be hiring a few more women. You'd be hiring a few more other minority people, as opposed to just being homogenous and being the same group all the time. So that's why I think inclusion is very important. Secondly, I do think that, if 50% of your population are women, and they have a lot of buying power, they have a lot of economic power, you're going to want to play to them a little bit too as well. So you want to make sure that people like them are being given opportunities. And that's why I do it more so than anything else. Heck, probably one of the most powerful people in this building is my chief of staff, and she's a woman. And she's been tremendous, and she understands and gets, how we do things. And that's one of the things that you got to understand is that, it's just, people just got to understand, if you have people that are qualified, hire them. And that's kind of how I've always felt about it.
I guess that's the ultimate goal of the rule, right?
Yes.
It's not necessarily about forcing anything. It's to make sure the best guy gets the best job, or girl lands the position, and making sure the talent is there, and not looking at any of the kind of more superficial stuff that comes along with it.
Well, I'll tell you this. In 2015, when I was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers and we went to the Super Bowl, at my Super Bowl press conference, somebody raised their hand and asked me this question. Coach, do you know you have the most diversified coaching staff in the NFL? And do you do that intentionally? And I was surprised. I said, no, I had no idea I had the most diverse. He said, well, you do. And look at where you are. I said, wow, I appreciate that. I said, but I'll be honest with you. When I hired my staff, I only hired who I thought were the best fits for us. They were qualified, but they fit us. They believed in the same things I did, and that's how I did it. And it really worked out in a very positive way. So I've always kind of thought that way, I guess, that it's about hiring the best people that fit the best.
Yeah. Coach, I want to ask actually a little bit about you've talked a little bit about your time at the Panthers, but there's a story that I've seen you tell, and you've probably told 1,000 of times, and I'm sorry to make you tell it again, but we recently lost, obviously, the great John Madden earlier this year.
Yes.
He had a pretty significant impact on your coaching career, and even how we came to know you as, of course, Riverboat Ron. And I'm wondering if you don't mind telling the story about how John Madden impacted your coaching career.
Well, after my first 2 years as the head coach in Carolina, I had the dubious distinction of being 3-13 in games that were decided by 6 points or less. And when I finished that year out and talking with my previous owner, one of the things that he had suggested to me was that I find a mentor. And he said, look, I know John Madden very well, and I know that if you call him, Coach would probably want to help you out. I said, sure. So I called Coach Madden. We had a great conversation, and I said, Coach, I'm looking for a mentor, somebody to help me kind of take the next step, because I feel I'm on the precipice of going to the next level. I just need some help. He said, sure. He said, come see me. He said, but before you come see me, I want you to do a little homework for yourself. I said, I want you to go out and I want you to look at those 13 games that you lost by 6 points or less. I want you to go out. I want you to do a report. Figure out what you could have done better. I said, okay. So made arrangements. This is the off season. I was going to go out and see him in February, late February. So I went to work. I watched those 13 games, and I wrote up a report about what happened and how things went. And in one game I can remember writing, okay, got into this situation. It was 4th and 1.5 to go. We're up by 3 and decide to go ahead and kick. And the thing I remember about that was I had gone by the book. Okay. The book says, hey, you kick the field goal, take your chances. Okay. So we go back. I got this nice 20-page report on all these games, and I figured, okay, I'm going to show it to Coach. So I go out there, I sit down, we're talking, and Coach says, and I said to Coach, I said, hey, I did that report you asked me to do about the 13 games lost by 6 points or less. And then I said, report. So I pulled it out of my backpack, and he goes, well, what's that? I said, well, that's for you. He says, no, it's not for me. It was for you. What did you learn? I said, well, I was doing things by the book. He goes, looks at me, goes, what book? I said, well, I did what you're supposed to do. And the more we talked, the more I began to realize, he's trying to make a point. And I said, well, I don't get it. He goes, Ron, you've played enough football. You've coached enough football to know what to do. He said, take this game, for instance. And I looked, I said, yeah. I said, Coach, we're up by 3. We're driving. We get down to their 26, and it was 1.5 yards to go. And I opted to go ahead and kick the field goal to go up by 6. He said, yeah, but touchdown still beats you, doesn't it? And I said, yeah. He goes, you could have ended it if you had gotten the first down. I said, yeah, I could have. And it made me realize that I was doing what was safe, not what was right. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people don't want to take those chances, take that risk. So I did. I did what was safe. So he made his point. So come into the next year, I started going for it on 4th downs. We were playing New York at home. I went for it on 4th downs. We converted on our first series twice and scored a touchdown and went on and won the game. Then we go out to Minnesota, did the same thing. Opening drive, we go all the way down. We get 4th down. I go for it on 4th down. We score the touchdown. Okay, win. And what I began to see was the amount of confidence the players were gaining because I was believing in them. And so what happened was after about 3 games of doing that, somebody said to put it out in the media, a tweet. He goes, boy, Coach Rivera has been going for it on fourth down like a riverboat gambler. So somebody else put together this picture of me in a riverboat cowboy outfit, sitting on a riverboat, and called me Riverboat Ron. Well, my daughter, while she was away in college, she saw that, thought it was kind of cute, so she retweeted it. So now I'm in a press conference, and somebody says to me, says, Coach, so what do you think about being known as Riverboat Ron? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, that somebody said that, Coach Rivera is going for it on fourth down like a riverboat gambler. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah, even your daughter agrees. I said, what? And they pull out their cell phones, and they go, yeah, look, it's on her Twitter page. And I looked, so as soon as I got done with my press conference, I called my wife and said, did you know what your daughter did? You got to talk to her. And so that's how it all came about. That's how I got the nickname Riverboat Ron, because of Coach Madden getting me to realize that when you do these things, you make these decisions, you got to rely on your experience as well, not just on what's safe.
Ron, we thoroughly enjoyed the chat so far. Have you got a couple of minutes just for a couple of last questions, or do you need to
I got a couple more minutes. I got
just a couple of quick questions the lads have.
Coach, I just wanted to ask you, could you speak a little bit on your transition from playing? Obviously, you were selected in 1984 as a linebacker for the Bears, and then your transition into coaching. Do you think that helped kind of mold you as the coach you are?
I think it did. A lot of it has to do with the way I grew up. My dad was in the United States military, so I grew up with a lot of discipline and understanding of chain of command. Then I played for Mike Dicko, who was a very tough, hard-nosed guy, as well as Buddy Ryan, who was a very tough, hard-nosed guy. But the one thing about my opportunity of being a player was that I experienced it. So when I talk about doing things to our players, it's about really being the voice of experience. You can't get something over me because I've been there, I've seen it, or I've done it. And so that's what I tell our players is, hey, look, I played the game, so I get it. I understand it. Doesn't mean I'm any better or any smarter than the other coach. It just gives me the same perspective that you have. And I think that has helped me. And the biggest thing I had to get used to from being a player to being a coach is that I was not a player anymore. I was now a coach, and I had to look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, Coach, I want to ask finally, you speaking about your playing career, and you during your time in the NFL, you had one touchdown scored against the Detroit Lions. And my question for that is, was it a fumble or an incomplete pass?
Sure looked like a fumble to me. Just so you know, Darren, it's way too late to change it. So I'm very happy about that.
Rob, before we let you go, one last question. Obviously, we all know now at this point that Washington Commanders have put down $100 million for some land out there in Virginia, and you've talked a little bit about the development that's going on. How are your plans looking for your fantastic office? I presume at least half of that budget is going towards your panoramic view and maybe some flat screen TVs and a fantastic couch and stuff like that.
You know what? It's too bad I can't. I might be able to turn this. You guys got to see my office. It is actually a lot bigger than I anticipated. So over this side, there's the panoramic. You can see everything throughout the practice field. And then you can obviously see my chief of staff, Natalia. She's sitting there. Okay. So that's that. If I turn you to the other side, you can see my gigantic flat screen that I use to watch practice tape. And that's over there in that corner. That thing's that's an 80-incher right there, buddy. So yeah, it's a pretty good setup. So believe me, we'll have something like that in the new facility, wherever it is, whether it be in Virginia, Maryland, or the DC area.
Fantastic.
So will their podcast studio be next to your office, or is it further down the hall?
That'd be down the hall because that's where they'll have the studio. They have it.
Oh, that's all right.
Fantastic.
It's okay.
Well, Rod, thanks a million for your time. We have thoroughly enjoyed our chat. We had a great time. We really do mean it. If you are in Ireland, you need anything sorted, a few drinking buddies or anything else, recommendations for pub, please do hit us up. We'd be absolutely delighted to help you out, point you in the right direction.
What I am going to do, guys, is I will reach out to you and let you know when we're going to be there. That way we can get together. I would love to be able to at least touch bases with you guys and then have a drink. Just to really appreciate you guys. This is the second time I've been on your podcast, and I've really enjoyed our conversations. All right?
Well, thanks a million, Ron. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, fellas.
And that's all from us here at the Under Center podcast. Please do follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Under Center Pod. You can also find this podcast on YouTube, Under Center Podcast, and the audio version is available Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you get your podcast. Just search Under Center Podcast. From myself and all the lads, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again next week.